This is a subject very dear to my heart. I'm often a panelist. But as you well know, that a lot of the discussion has been so far really focused in on, you know, what's about the fuels, about the technical sort of aspects, the availability, you know, the infrastructure and all those things, naturally. But I think the conversation has come round now more to the human element part of it, or the people side of things, and we recognise that transition is going to. So that's where we want to go today. We really want to dig into to this, and this panel here is just pretty much unbeatable, I think, as far as that goes, and they've got some really great insights to share with him, and I think we're going to have a really fantastic discussion. You've seen the Slido is there as well. Please, you know, do feel free to ask questions. But to get started, I think you can see who everybody is here. We won't waste our time going through CVs, but obviously we can feel free to sort of introduce yourselves as I kind of ask you the questions. And the first thing on my mind is when you're in a lot of these decarbonisation discussions, people are talking about it as it's like something that's happening in the future, right? Because we're focused on 2030 or 2050 goals. But there are ships in the bay right now, you know, being fuelled by methanol and by ammonia as well. So I'm going to ask you to kick us off, Kenneth, and give us the kind of, how are you approaching this? Because these are in your port right now. You've been very active in this space, so maybe you could kick us off.
Thank you very much. And I think since the topic is about human and the heroes, I think that's the one key thing that we do when we do the trial for MERS, for methanol, and then for Fortescue on the ammonia. The key objective, of course, is the safe operation and the safe bunkering of these fuels. Since we already have our conventional fuel, we have 8 years of experience in LNG, and then we do biofuel, and hence this new fuel that may be coming on board in 2026, 27. And so the preparation needs to start now, right? Because it is all about the seafarers and, of course, the onshore workers and colleagues to be safe if such fuel were to be used in our port waters. So like methanol, the first thing that we keep thinking is, and to do, is to make the management to be aware the flame of methanol. If there is a fire on board and the methanol caught fire, it is almost invisible. So actually you can't see the flame, and therefore we invite the management and the crew, and even IMO SecGen, when he was here during the Singapore Maritime Week, to do that trial and to see for himself how to put a fire out for methanol, because you can't see it, and therefore you need to have technology to assist you to observe the flame. Likewise, if there's an ammonia, how is the plume going to be like, and where your seafarer is going to stand on board during the bunkering become very important. So down to that steps of where do you stand, where do you paint red zone in your on board your ships and all that. So it is all about making sure that the seafarers and the shore workers are able to understand clearly, not to have too much burden in terms of reading out too many manuals, by visual inspection, by gauges, by technology to help them to overcome this and to get them prepared for the new fuel. Yeah.
Thanks, Kenneth. And I think that on that preparation side of things, you mentioned a lot of different sort of aspects in there that kind of start to, you know, formulate the kinds of things that we need to enable people to achieve. And I know that, James, I'm going to come to you next, because this is really the purpose of what's been set up there in terms of. So can you give us a bit of a background in terms of how you're feeding into that work?
Yeah, sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. For those of you that haven't come across the Maritime Decarbonisation Hub, we are a non-profit focused on supporting maritime's decarbonisation. And with reference to this question, we've been working on the Maritime Just Transition Task Force together with Ocean Technology Group and a number of other consortium members, looking at trying to build the recommended crew competency framework for that ultimately will go to STCW for vessels powered by ammonia, by methanol, and by hydrogen. So, speaking more broadly about challenge at hand, since you mentioned that these ships are already being ordered, that they're already, to a certain extent, on the water. Coming from a class society background, I'm aware of what has happened in the regulatory space to allow for those vessels to be designed, to be constructed, to be classed. And the frame of reference that we have had in the industry so far has been at a system risk level. So we've understood that these new fuels bring hazards, that they have attributes and characteristics that we're not used to handling as fuels within our industry, and that's going to bring a lot more risk to our seafarers. So the way we've dealt with that so far has been to set system-based solutions. I'm going to add this safety feature here, I'm going to add that protection or that control mechanism there. And that's all good, that all needs to happen. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But the net impact of that is that it has also meant, and therefore the seafarer needs to learn this, and they need to learn that, and they need to learn how to do the next thing and the next thing. And collectively, we seem to have told ourselves that this is all going to be fine, this transition is going to be safe, so long as we train seafarers more, and we document exactly what the competency gaps are, and we explain everything that they need to learn. And that's kind of what's happening now. And again, I'll restate, that's not necessarily a bad approach. You need to start that approach. You need to understand what the competencies are that people need to have, but you shouldn't satisfy yourself that that's enough, because anyone who's had experience in trying to train a large group of people from very different backgrounds with very different routes to training will know that you worry about the consistency of what you can teach people. So I think we're in a place now where we need to ask ourselves, when's enough? When do we stop transferring the burden of complexity onto the operator and say it will be fine so long as the seafarer learns how to do this safely, and we close a little bit of an iterative loop that goes back into regulatory and standard development that says, how do I put the human at the center of what my acceptability criteria is, what a human-centric design and ergonomics can mean to keep people safe. It's a roundabout way of answering your question, I know, but in effect, I think that's a good snapshot of where we are at the moment and what we need to be careful for in the months and years to come.
Yeah, I think you've given us a lot of things that we need to kind of come back to, because I think we could jump into a number of different things, and I'm really keen to get your perspective, Celia, in a moment on how you're actually approaching that at the sharp end. But before we do, by way of a little bit more scene setting, I guess one of the questions that you've posed there, James, is the idea of can we build a curriculum which would satisfy everybody to that point? And I take your point that we can't solve it all by training, but is that possible to do? Because obviously we've been working with Just Transition Task Force, we've also been working with Nautical Institute. And Yves, do you want to just kind of give us a bit of a flavour of what we talk about with the green curriculum and trying to kind of come up with whilst the SDCW revisions and everything are taking place, to kind of find a quick route into building out a sort of curriculum that can deal with some of that?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to build a bit on what James has been saying. I think it really is important that we look after the seafarers, that we make sure that they know how to operate these new fuels. And Raal was mentioning the Nautical Institute published the green curriculum. This was back in August 2022. At that time, the Nautical Institute, we are a professional body. We look after the standards that seafarers are operating at, in above and beyond STCW. We are not interfering with STCW. And we wanted to make sure that as Nautical Institute, we provided a framework that then maritime academies worldwide can use to create their own curriculum locally. So what we did is we published the green curriculum, and over the last 2 years we have been working on preparing our own framework. That is about finished and will be published later in the year. Of course, in the meantime, the Maritime Transition Task Force came along, and they are doing the same, to which the Nautical Institute is cooperating as well. But I think that is important that from our perspective, we go above and beyond what STCW is requiring. And you mentioned it there as well. STCW, the review is ongoing. It'll take quite some time before that gets finalized. We don't know what the result is going to be. And even once it gets finalized, we'll still have to wait a number of years before it's finally going to get implemented. But I think it is good meanwhile, and I just want to highlight that certainly for the Singapore side, the Maritime Academy here in Singapore, meanwhile, has already created their own curriculum and is providing training to seafarers on the use of alternative fuels. So I think we can see these points getting done, and I'm sure that other maritime academies will follow worldwide. In the end, the problem will be what is going to be the gap with the model course that the IMO is going to decide on, and what are we going to do then to bridge that gap?
Yeah, thanks, Yves. And I think that's worth saying as well in there that there's some of the discussions that we were having in kind of both groups really is around like minimum standards and whether minimum standards is actually going to be enough. So what happens in STCW may not, and that's another motivator for the Nautical Institute approach of saying, well, there's something above and beyond. Where I'd like to go next is that you're talking about, you mentioned maritime education and training. We need to come back to the possibility of a fragmentation if everyone's doing their own thing. I do want to get into that. But you mentioned maritime education and training, and I think this is one of the really key things about this transition, because the model that we've all been working to for a very long time is that the seafarer of yesterday trains the seafarer of tomorrow. And of course, if we're moving into uncharted areas, you know, how is that going to work? But I think just at the moment, Sanjeev, you know, with Wartsila, you know, you've been supporting maritime education and training for a very long time. We've got this situation where maritime education and training has been able to work to very defined standards that haven't changed for a very long time or minor updates. How are you guys at Wartsila looking at working with METIs to work in this interim stage when we don't have those standards in place?
Well, for starters, we're looking at the interim guidelines that are being published by the regulatory bodies.
Can you just put your mic quite close to you?
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. For starters, we're looking at the interim guidelines that are being published by the regulatory bodies. Then we are also in discussion with the end users. As part of the Wartsila's larger group, you also have the physical equipments being delivered in terms of the new fuels and others. So when you get those references as to what are the problems in usage of that, those are being incorporated. But I think the biggest challenge is now that compared to the earlier era of when new regulations or aspects came out, say like a ballast water management system or something, there were very set standard guidelines about what the equipment was about and what is it about. But now when you're looking at the decarbonization, there are multiple paths in order to achieve that. And that creates a challenge because finally someone is going to use some solutions of that in order to achieve their decarbonization. And that's when you do not have the regulations also that matured, but you need a products to be developed because many of these solutions require a virtual environment which is risk-free, in which you need to have a certain amount of time to get used to the product, used to the operations. So that's when you look at some interim guidelines, you look at your experience of having delivered the physical products. And again, the challenges in the training products being developed is case-to-case basis. When you're looking at methanol and ammonia, that's like a greenfield development. You're looking at the supply, you're looking at the HMI interfaces, you're looking at the PLC controls. It's a lot of training components that need to be developed. But there are also some trainings that are just like a modules that need to be added in. For example, you have the fuel EU Maritime coming in where there's focus on the shore energy to be used. So we have an existing models that are there. It's only that you need to, develop the certain aspects of the shore module in the training requirements. So again, that depends. So you do not require that much of regulatory aspect to that. You have your basic guidelines. You just add in a few, modalities to it and move forward. So it depends on a case-to-case basis, but it will be good if the regulations get matured fast, so you have a framework, at least the interim guidelines or so you can work on that. And I think from our aspect, being agile is important so that you can make the changes accordingly.
Yeah, I think whenever something new like this comes in, the iterations, there's going to be a lot of change early on. But Celia, this is when we spoke the other day, it was fantastic to hear this because there's a lot of theorizing, right? We're all people like me sitting on panels, kind of chatting away around. Oh yeah, it could be like this, could be like. You're actually doing it. You're already there. You know, you've heard some different perspectives here on setting up stuff, but you're operating right now with what you've got, right? So could you give us a bit of an idea of the challenges and how you're approaching to solve them?
Yeah, of course, I see someone from us here, so without stealing their light as well. So again, I'm working with Eastaway Ship Management, and then we are part of the Express Feeder groups, which I think is more familiar to most of the audience. So what happened was that, you know, like what Kenneth have mentioned, it was quite an interest. I mean, we have our first delivered vessel in March, and then we had our first bunker ops and cargo ops at the same time in Singapore. So again, you know, I think it's the first for MPA, and that is when we talk about what is enough, what level of training is enough, what sort of information is enough, you know, whether in terms of course we are more concerned on safety, and so that was like, I think we have taken about 3 months in discussing this, and of course eventually during the rollout, we were trying to look for a business partner to do the training for us. Unfortunately, a few of the individuals here, we still have not had the training formalized with SMA as well. So what we did was we worked with Green Marine, who we know that they kind of have a lot of expertise in the team handling methanol. And yeah, so that was, so we have to craft out a course with them, train our seafarer, fly them to Singapore as well to do the firefighting, as what Kenneth has also mentioned. So yeah, the portion on methanol is that you can't see what you're fighting, right? And you know, human being, we fear what we don't see. So again, to be honest, is it that bad? I think the answer is no, but it is also giving the sea staff the confidence to know what to do, and that's how we started the project, by overkilling in terms of training, making sure that we send expertise to talk to them. And even until right now, every day is a learning day. So every time whenever we hear new trainings being put on the table, like what Wartsila has right now on the simulator, we get very involved in all this. So maybe that is the cause of being the front runner, and hopefully we will get more people joining us in this race, and then, you know, that will be maybe something good for the industry together, yeah, and also for seafarers, of course.
Thank you. And you mentioned seafarer confidence, and I think that's a really important thing that I want to talk about. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm on LinkedIn, and this kind of, you start, you know, I start put things on there and get conversations started, but I got something for a seafarer who actually responded to something I'd put on about ammonia. And it led into a bit of a discussion, and then he wrote a paper for me to kind of give me the idea of, and I've been circulating that with some of the bodies that we've talked about. But what it was clear to me that this was an engineer, and he was very, very worried about ammonia, and he felt that it was being almost kind of pushed on them, you know, from a safety aspect, not really well thought through, not really defined. What would your message be, or how can we build confidence in the seafarer community about this transition? I don't know, open to anybody, or I'll pick on someone if not. Yves,
I'll try. I'll give it a go. If you're talking about ammonia, I was sailing on gas tankers. I've carried so much ammonia during my days. I've sniffed so much ammonia that my lungs are probably clean for the rest of my life. But of course, and there goes the difference, it's very different to work with ammonia as a fuel as compared to me in my past, carrying it as a cargo. And I think you really need to get the training right. You need to get your virtual, preferably, first before they go on board, because the problem is you don't have enough ships to try and do the practical training. You need to get that right so that they can build that confidence. And I quite like what James was saying as well about making it human-centric, to make sure that doesn't matter where they are, that it is the same type of equipment that they see in front of them.
Yeah, should I just build on that? I mean, thinking, you know, talking about a competency standard as a mechanism to give them confidence. All a competency standard does is say, here are the topics that you need to know. That's all it ultimately does. And then a model course and a syllabus will attempt to teach you that. But you're still going to come on board and see a manual like this that you need to absorb really quickly to understand how that works on that ship. And when you're introducing fuels that have a characteristic, whether it's toxicity or otherwise, that is new and somewhat abstract and feared, the idea that you protect yourself by accurately absorbing that manual is very, very daunting to the seafarer, and it should be daunting to the seafarer. So this concept of human centricity that we were talking about is trying to learn from industries that have faced similar high hazard situations where human system interaction is the source of the main risk, and saying, how do I make this as simple as possible for the user? How do I make sure my design philosophy and my point of view is a human being is using this system rather than this system is performing a function? And I think there's a lot of potential in that, and it's thought of as a bit of a fringe approach in our industry at the moment. You know, when I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to me speak right now are sort of thinking, oh, that seems very different to the way we do things in maritime. Why? It doesn't need to be. It's a very effective hazard mitigator in other high hazard industries. Why don't we look at it?
Just to build up on, just to add on to what James was saying, is that when you look at a new fuel, and if it's like a big manual with multiple pages, there's always going to be a worry in the mind of the seafarer. Same thing happens for a simulator. When even in a virtual environment, when you're looking at it, where there's a risk-free environment, but still when you're looking at multiple pages of the mimics and the systems that are there, there's a confusion that's going to come in the seafarer from the start, that it's a very complicated system. That's why we, in the simulation environment also, we are breaking it down into something called as a blended learning. What we are trying to do is that we are taking certain subset of the mimics, combining and binding them together and making them as a small 30-minute session. It could be something like a basic procedure of getting a system lined up for bunkering. You can break it into systems like getting the purging system ready, getting the, the tanks ready or something like that. So when you break up into partial systems or operations, it becomes much more conducive for the seafarer to get. And also when it's like a 30 minutes exercise, self-directed, he has a pace in which he can. And then when he starts picking up on that, and gets a better understanding and feel those same mimics and those pages are part of a larger simulation program, where he is then getting introduced to a larger quantity of mimics and features. Then he gets more familiar. So it's an incremental learning. So that's what we see that we have tried it in the LNG, phase when we introduced it. Has worked wonders. So the audience has changed not only from the training institutes, but directly to ship managers and the ship owners, where the blended learning and the self-directed exercises has become kind of good grasp for the seafarers. So we are trying to put that same thing when we are trying to develop the methanol and ammonia. So breaking down the simulator into small subsets, getting to understand the minor systems first, then move on to the major system, combine them together, and then you do an instructor-led training.
Yeah. And Celia, firsthand, I mean, are your seafarers feeling confident, do you think? Are they...
Yeah, I hope my CEO doesn't have, like, I know that he's looking into this, and yeah, we had a chat that time. So my previous company that I used, my CEO, his name is Mark. Until now, I cannot forget the conversation that I have with him on ammonia. And yeah, and because of that, I will think that for me to train the staff to better understand or live with ammonia, I'm sure the journey will be maybe at least 3 times longer than the methanol project, because I think the impact is really huge. And yes, yeah. I don't think risking life is.
And I was going to say,
the risk is much higher.
I think as well, it's confidence in themselves, but also confidence in the systems. This particular seafarer is very, very worried, for example, about retrofitting and about it actually being a closed loop, and the differences there between LNG. Maybe we could get into that. But confidence goes both, it has sort of 2 dimensions here, right? So you mentioned sort of competency management and how you kind of track that. And you can also make that about practical things. You can capture practical exercise as well, so it's not all theory. But the one advantage of that is to use that as a mechanism for building the competence of the seafarer. The second thing is using it to evidence that training has been done and that competencies have been achieved. How are you approaching this from the port side of things? So, like, if you're allowing vessels into port, in absence of any kind of training standard around these things, what does it take for you to have confidence that that's
Yes, indeed, this confidence have to build over time, and for ammonia case is working with Fortescue. So when Fortescue retrofit the vessel to burn the ammonia, we start with very small quantity over a very long period of time to get the right process, and also to bring in a lot of stakeholders in, including the researchers in terms of plume cloud, and then of course Singapore Poly for their virtual reality, making sure that they are trained in terms of picking the right PPE to wear, the right equipment. Then they do a scan, LiDAR scan of the vessels so that they can do the walkthrough virtually to see where is the pipe that you need to put in, the valve that you need to ensure that open. Why we do all this is because that capability needs to be built for the regulator ourselves. We need to know what kind of vessels we are going to handle so that in future when the vessel operation center talk to the captain on board or to the crew on board, we know what we are talking about, and whether for the bunkering operation to proceed or not to proceed is also something that we also will gain the confidence. So I think it is for any new areas, whether it's digitalization, decarbonization, new fuel, it's all about coming together, whether it's standards, whether it's technology, whether it's the crew, whether owner, whether regulator, to learn that process such that we can gain that confidence to say, look, these are the mistakes we made, and therefore we need to mitigate that. Let's do it again now with another quantity over another period. So I think for methanol, we have progressively done it such that from ship to ship, I think, and then to shore to ship, and then simultaneous operation. All these are gradual steps that we take to build up that confidence, and besides confidence, then the capabilities to handle such new environment.
Thank you. So we do have a question here. I'm going to read it from here. Question to you, Sanjeev. Do you do engine simulators for mixtures of fuel that do not exist in today's reality? Do you use simulators for research purposes?
Yeah, presently simulators are a closed environment. When you're talking about research purposes, then it is something like it being interconnected with a digital twin and all that. There's a thought and a process to move towards that direction, because real-time data being a part of the simulation is good. As when you're looking within the simulation environment, it's a predetermined and a model data that you're using, and a static environment. That's something and a thought that we plan to do, but it's still in the what do you say thought process. And the second aspect, you're asking mixtures of fuel that do not exist in today's reality. Presently, the engine room models pertain to the the fuels that are available. So when you're looking at, say, dual fuel model that we have in an offering, it is limited to either LNG, because that's the vessel. It is also closely associated with the kind of engine that is part of the simulation model. So if you're using an engine as part of the base of that particular model, and it operates on the LSFO, HFO, and LNG, it will be limited to that. So because the simulation modeling is also being done on the real data, though it's static within the environment of the simulator, but the data is real. You've captured the data and put it into the modeling. So when you bring into fuels whose properties are still unknown, and you need to understand how it reacts and all that, it's not the right aspect to put it into a simulator and create it, because it's not something like, it's very close to reality, the simulators that you're providing, and it needs to be on the real data. So as of now, the fuels which are not in use are not being induced within the existing ARS models or the engine.
Thank you. We do have another question. Have the panelists approached seafarer training to make them feel and experience the impact of exposure to ammonia, for them to appreciate the risk? Has this come up?
I think experimenting on humans isn't
I don't think
really.
they mean that we experiment.
What I can say is that we are looking for alternative gas that we could simulate, and then you add the flavor. So we've been asking all the researchers what is the, for perfume industry, they always mix all the chemicals together to make nice smelling chemicals. But what is can they do it for maritime, for the smell of ammonia? For methanol, I think that's fine because it's a flame. I think that's the thing that we are simulating and all that. But for ammonia, you need to have that smell. So in the whole training is all about that exposure. Because for guys who are in Singapore will know that in the army we do our training in the gas chamber and for tear gas to simulate how you put on your things, your PPE and all that. That's the kind of thinking that we are looking at for seafarers, which is why, to Sanjeev's point also is, actually we wanted to get all the engine makers together for ammonia to be able to do that training simulator for ammonia in preparation.
Well, I think we need to sort of wrap things up. I think this is a great question to end on. And I'll ask this to all of you, really. How should seafarer training evolve to support decarbonisation goals? What skills and knowledge are essential for operating future green technologies? Great question. James?
I'd love to start. I love that question because so much of... there are so many incremental options to improve vessel efficiency that exist, and so much of it comes down to how the vessels are operated, how people interact with the technology install base, and how people choose to behave on the ship. So I love the sentiment of that question. I think that's exactly right. When you look at emissions reduction technologies and these types of solutions, so many of the complaints of the people who install that technology is that I'm not getting the benefit, my crew aren't using it correctly, they don't understand what it's there for, they just turn it on when the superintendent tells them to. So absolutely, we should be training people to understand what's driving the installation of these things and what they can do. I was talking to Ardmore actually yesterday, and they were just talking about this competition that they had set up with their seafarers, where they said anybody who can propose us an idea every quarter on little things that we can do to reduce our environmental impact will win an iPad. And you just think, absolutely, do that. Let's do that as much as we possibly can. It's a really positive thing. So, great question.
Because you said to us, get on with it, get making some training. One of the reasons we've done it this year. So
yeah, I know, right? So
what more do you want?
Thanks for accepting all the pressure. I think I think the keyword now definitely is collaboration. So working with various people who have the edge in technology, people who have the knowledge. One thing which, other than seafarer, I think the training should also reach the shore staff as well. So do they really understand? Because at the end of the day, when the crew has any issue, of course they will call me when they want to go home, but they will call the technical or the marine soup when they needed support and when they need to find out why they are doing what they are doing, right? So it's also about getting the buy-in from the shore staff as well. And in terms of future technology, I think right now not only about technologies, but in terms of training as well. Last time when video is like 2 hours, then it became 1 hour. Now it becomes 10 seconds or 20 seconds. I think everyone is getting adjusted to very short attention span. So which I think various training vendors, including OTG, is doing very well in this area. So I think everyone is working towards the same goal, trying to make sure that skills are really imparted to sea staff. Yeah.
Sanjeev, any thoughts on this one, just to wrap us up? Short, please.
Yeah, I would like to add that as you're moving towards the future fuels, the systems are becoming more complex. So there's always automation that's going to support you in terms of the various steps of operation. But inherently, you need to understand that all of these new vessels will have flexible operations. They'll have a dual fuel operation. So somewhere or the other, when you don't have the supply or when you have an issue with the future fuels, you come back to the traditional fuel usage. So understanding the basics of engine operations remain, but fostering digital skills is also important because the fail-safe methodologies are complex with the future fuels, and there will be a PLC kind of an automation logic that's supporting the operation. So it's a balance between digital skills understanding and also having a base understanding of engine operation.
Yeah. Yves, please.
I'm just going to build again on James's point, and I think we really need to learn from what went wrong during the implementation of ACDIS. And
I'm glad you said that.
I really would like for all of whether it is manufacturers, whether it is class, whether it is anybody, to really work together at standardizing how these new fuels are going to be used, so that we don't end up with 50 different systems on board of every ship.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point just to wrap up on as well, is that I think you've kind of said it, but I'll sort of summarize it in the sense that this isn't just a new fuels thing. It's in hand with digitization. There's a digital technology component to all of these evolving ships, and we need to look at that in the round, certainly from the skills building perspective. So I think we're there for time. Alex is looking at me. So it just remains for me to please thank the panel. Thank you all very much.